Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith, and dear listeners, at the time of recording this episode, it is incredibly hot in Vienna. We are right in the middle of a heat wave at the end of June. And to make it more interesting and make it even hotter, I'm here to welcome another splendid guest on the podcast, T.A. Styles. Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion, Thomas.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for making time for us. Here in Vienna, like I said, heat wave will make it even hotter with your books. Yes, indeed. And you, I think so, because you have written a dystopian series. Would it be correct to call it young adult fiction?
Yes, I think it would be appropriate. It certainly appeals to an adult audience too, for a reason. Definitely,
absolutely true. Yeah, yes. Absolutely true. I mean, book number 1 is called The Fortress, and the subtitle is a post-apocalyptic survival thriller, book number 1, which came out in August last year.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and Revenant and Kingdom are book 2 and book 3. Thomas, what can you tell our listeners about this series?
Well, the series was originally thought of as a standalone novel, which I was going to call The Fortress, about a man who gathered up orphans of the apocalypse and gave them refuge in his home, which he had purchased for his wife and daughter prior to their deaths from the apocalypse. And he basically spent 3 years training them and teaching the forage and created a life and a family. And there was about a dozen orphans that lived in his home. And then ultimately, as evil does, it catches up with them. And a man by the name of Zagan tries to take down what they've built over 3 years. So kids of all ages, from as young as 6 all the way up to 17, have to make a decision what they want to do. Do they want to leave the fortress and set up somewhere else, or do they want to fight for what's theirs? And so for me, it was a culmination of an idea I had about doing a home invasion story. I set it in the post-apocalypse because I kind of thought it made the most sense, telling a story like this in a time where there's no technology or phones or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a story at the center, I think, about a family, a makeshift family, a unique family, but also a story that tells a lot about principle and fighting for what you believe in, fighting for what's yours. And so yeah. And then the Revenant and the Kingdom kind of came as an afterthought. When I decided on the publication venue that I wanted to choose, I said what makes the most sense for me is continuing the story from The Fortress and creating a trilogy out of it, which is what I did with The Revenant and the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. And you said it's after the apocalypse. It's a virus you mentioned. So where did this idea come from? I mean, I said it was published in 2023. Did Corona play a little part in this, or not at all? Did you have the idea for this book way, way earlier?
No, I did not have the book for this earlier than the coronavirus. And honestly, it didn't really have much to do with that idea. It just kind of was a coincidence. I certainly had an understanding of what impact the coronavirus had on the world at that time. But let's face it, the post-apocalyptic genre is not unique. It's very, there's a lot of contributions to it. So, but I did know that one thing I wanted to do was creating a post-apocalyptic story that really didn't involve zombies and monsters and things like that. I did want it to be more rooted in just something a little more plausible. Like when I thought about the end of the world, I always think, well, if the end of the world is really going to happen, it's going to be a virus that takes us all out, like the coronavirus. It probably will not involve monsters and zombies and apocalypse. And then what will the world really be like? So I really wanted to portray my world as something that people could contemplate as far as, wow, what would the world be like without zombies and monsters, just a natural event that ended the largest portion of humanity. So I wanted my story to focus on that without those extraneous elements, because even in stories like, I'm a big follower of The Walking Dead, which is a universal, obviously, program, and even when they produce those stories, it's more about humanity and
Yeah.
humans than it is about monsters and zombies. They're more
Yeah.
peripheral. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well, why bother then? Let's just cut the zombies, and people can be evil. And with the breakdown of society and laws and all that, you're going to have enough to contend with without zombies and all that. There's going to be enough to write about, as far as what the world is going to be like. And parts of my story kind of mention, like we started, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago. This is how we started. We started at our basics, most basest, instance and self. So, and part of it, when you talk about an apocalyptic story that's without zombies and monsters, you're just basically talking about rewinding time and looking back to where we all started as a race. So, and what the challenges were in that.
And one would think such an event would bring us closer together, but it seems to me that it brings out either the best or the worst in people.
I think it is. I do think that. I don't know that there's the people in the middle ground, or the people that don't really, they're just trying to survive. Whereas the people on the other end of the spectrum are saying, I'm going to help improve and get humanity back to where it was, or society back where it was. And you have the other people on the other end of the spectrum that are trying to destroy what's left, or at least control it. And then you have the people that are kind of trapped in the middle. So yeah, you do have a story with The Fortress that ultimately is a story about good versus evil, and then everybody trapped in between who have to make a decision which direction they want to go. Do they want to be enslaved by the worst humanity ever, or do they want to be rebels and be among the ones that have the best vision and the strongest vision, and the most honest and vision of the future. So,
do you think that in the last few years, I've asked that question quite a few authors who write fantasy, sci-fi, and dystopian fiction, that there has been a change from a more utopian outlook to a more dystopian outlook in the last, let's say, 10 years?
Yeah, it would definitely seem as if we're moving towards a more pessimistic notion of what society is going to become. But I mean, let's look at the Roman Empire and any empire in the world, or any world. I mean, the dinosaurs were exterminated through natural event millions of years. I mean, I just think it follows the natural course and the cyclical course of how things go with humanity, with people, with dynasties, with the natural occurrences in the life, the ice ages, the ending of the dinosaurs, making way for the humans. I just think everything is, no matter how you look at it, everything is just escalates towards that end of the pendulum, and then the pendulum swings back, and then it goes back. So for me, I just look at it as part of the cycle. There's you got your ebb flows, and this is where we are. And if global warming and all these ideas about the ice caps melting and just society's collapsing. I mean, even the United States, obviously, there's a very pessimistic view, even with the recent presidential debate over here. Like, what is the best? What's going to be bad? I don't know. The lesser of two evils kind of thing. So, it's just kind of all in line. Just look at it. I have this attitude, like, I'm only here for a short time. The world is going to naturally go towards where the world has gone in the past. We're going to reach our best, and then we're going to reach our worst. The world is going to determine when we need to be reset. And that's just going to happen naturally, no matter how we do things. I think that's my viewpoint.
Yeah. And what about your characters? You said, I mean, dystopian, or we agree that dystopian fiction has a high at the moment. Let's put it that way. For the last, I suppose we could also agree, the last 10 years. And your character. I mean, your character, Sim, he's the one who starts this enterprise of the fortress and how to rebuild society or
Right.
give children a safe place, keep them safe. That is his motto in book number 1: save a child, save the children, and keep them safe, and help them to cope with what's going on. Where did he or his character come from?
I think his character came from deep within me. I have for 30 years, I've been working with children and had a passion for children since I was young. I raised 2 children of my own, a boy and a girl. So I have a large breadth of experience in life. People say, well, what do I want to do with my life? And you just look at, well, the best thing you can do is follow what your passions are. I've had a passion for educating children. I started a company that I've been running for 15 years where I've worked with children at a recreational and social level, which has been amazing, all different ages. And for me, it's just a passion. So Sim is kind of born out of my own personal feelings. What would I kind of want to do if I was in the apocalypse? I thought of the Cider House Rules, that novel, and how he took that man, the older man, he was very passionate about his orphanage and the kids that he had in there. And, that resonated with me. And Sim is part me, and his militaristic side as well. Because I remember when I was 12, this story in many parts was I was a boy of the 80s, United States, Rambo, G.I. Joe. So I grew up on all of those ideas about, and had so much fun. I was a boy's boy. And when you're growing up in the United States in the 80s, it's reflected in a lot of, Stranger Things and those kind of popular shows and such. Now, that was me back in the 80s. I'm like, wow, yeah, we love guns, we love war, we loved, we thought of ourselves as, and it was a lot of fun. So the fortress for me was, I got to satisfy the best of two worlds. I'm a 50-year-old man. I'm a father. I'm a caretaker of children, and that's who I became. But in the 80s, I was this boy. I was this teen. I was this young person wanting to just do guns and dress in camouflage and have a war and a battle and a GI Joe and So in the fortress, it satisfied. I guess it was a pet project of mine to just do a story like this. So Sim is in large part born out of me, every really aspect of him. So if I was in the apocalypse and the same thing happened, I would probably be doing the same thing. Only Sim was more motivated because of guilt. He had a wife and a child. And that backstory, I don't know if I should reveal it here, but his backstory is what kind of motivated him. And the first orphan he took in, named Elizabeth, it really helped him push him.
And what I found interesting in the book, also at the beginning of the book, is that you didn't shy away from mentioning that not everyone makes it. It's a harsh world out there, and a lot of the comfort we are used to is gone, like you said, mobile phones and so on, but also medical help. And children die, people die of the most, I don't know, common things.
I did not want this to be a fairy tale story. And in The Revenant, I know you said you'd read The Fortress, but in The Revenant, a big subplot of the story is one of the orphans gets a tooth infection that really proves fatal. So no, I did not want this to be a story because the way I looked at it too is people will look at, and I almost look at this as kind of, if we look at in the United States, the Alamo story, that was a tragic outcome for all the people that tried to defend the Alamo. And this is a very similar story in the last multiple pages. But I wanted to kind of be a story like that, regardless of the fact that there were children, because I know around the world, children are soldiers. I've read books. I saw Gavroche from Les Miserables to Agu and Beasts of No Nation. There are kids out there that are involved in these situations. There are kids that have fought. There are kids that have played drums in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and been killed. Kids in war is nothing new. People want to look at them as, hey, but no, kids have died valiantly. Kids have participated in war, and, it's just the way it is. And I wanted to portray that. But at the same time, I wanted to portray children as children. So I hope readers of The Fortress will see that even though these guys as young as 6 are in life and death situations, and some of them don't make it. But they've made decisions for themselves, regardless, based on the upbringing over the 3 years since Sim took them in. They are still children. They play with Nerf guns. They talk about Disney World. They do their hair and nails and have those kid conversations and do silly and goofy things. And I wanted to cherish that about my kids, because I think, I don't know. And honestly, I don't do a ton of reading in the genre. Um, but I do notice that a lot of times children aren't portrayed in these kinds of stories and these kinds of literature, at least effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to bring that to the genre. I wanted to show children the genre. And there's another man named O.T. Nelson who did a story about children in an apocalyptic world where all adults over 18 died and it was just children running society. The girl who owned a city. And I read that from cover to cover after I started writing the story, and I looked at the differences and similarities, um, and it definitely was a similar vibe as far as wanting to celebrate children and what their strengths were and what they could accomplish on their own. And the only difference was, in my case, I thought that the presence of adults, strong adult role in the lives of the children, was important for them to get to A to B, whereas in O.T. Nelson's book, it was more about children could just naturally, do all these wonderful things without any kind of guidance, which I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's a little bit like in The Lord of the Flies, maybe?
Yeah, and look at what happened in Lord of the Flies. It was much more, things descended to madness and chaos and,
Yeah.
So rosy in the end. So
Yeah.
where O.T. Nelson's book was kind of more positive. Yes, children were able to accomplish all this.
Okay.
And in the fortress, the children ended up being extremely civilized. But when it came time to fight for what they believed, they were ready to fight. It was more organized chaos. Lord of the Flies was just descended into madness. These kids trying to rule themselves, and yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, you had in your book, you have this adult influence, how to teach them what's good, what's bad. I mean, and in the end, it still comes down to a fight between good and evil, because there are always people who, like we said at the beginning, that when something like an apocalypse or the end of the world brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
Or they are no longer hindered by the law and
or like
society's rules.
Are who they are.
Yes. They reveal their true self.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I see. But when you look at in the part 2 of the book, as I developed it, The Revenant, Zagan gets a little more of a backstory as how he connects to the new villains that are in that story, and you get to know a little bit more about how he came to be who he was. Not a ton, but you see the group he was affiliated with, and they're there to kind of find out what happened to him, and so but yeah.
This is also a question of nature and nurture a little bit, isn't it? Is it not? I mean, like you mentioned the villain from book number 1. It also reminds me again, since you mentioned The Walking Dead, Negan. Yeah. I mean, how he became the person he was when we first meet him. Turns out he wasn't always that kind of man.
Yeah.
Life taught him.
Yeah. Well, they had a lot to do. They had a lot to do to reinvent Negan's persona, because they were going to use him as a major character and turn him around. I loved what they did with him, obviously, because I liked him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you're an adult man like Negan was, and then I think a lot of it, what you end up being, is imprinted at a very young age. And by the time you get to Negan's age, when he was married, if he was kind of that way as his age, it's hard for me to believe that he would have become Negan with the baseball bat, 10 years later. I don't know. I don't buy that. I think corruption has to happen a lot earlier. in age than that, quite honestly. So that's why for me, having these children nurtured by Sim at their earliest ages was important, because I think by the time they say your synapse is close by when so from a brain
Yeah,
standpoint,
yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right, or probably very right, because when you think of the Jesuits, they always, what was their motto? Their motto was, "Give me a child of 7."
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's it.
yeah, that's
Uh,
it.
Childhood is extremely important, and as far as the connections you have, what you're taught, what you learn, what you see, and I don't know that enough people understand that aspect of things.
Yeah,
So
I feel
that's
so too. Yeah,
yeah,
because
and
because the brain is not fully developed at that age, and
right,
the adults have a huge influence on the development of
right,
the
even
child,
in very
especially here
subtle ways.
for. Yeah,
When you get to be older, you look back at some of the ways you even with your best intentions that you interact with young people, and you're thinking, "Wow, that probably wasn't the best." Even from little ones, eating the McDonald's from the time they're 5 years old, and when
yeah,
you look at every little aspect of
yeah.
what you do and how you engage children, it's important, and
Mm.
I want to build that as a huge theme in my story. And
Also,
Sim's not perfect, and one of the things I had to revise in treatments of the book was conflict with Sim. I just didn't want him to be a one-dimensional character
mm,
where he took in kids and that's it. His whole backstory was invented after the book was written, as far as why he was doing what he was doing,
okay.
and the conflict he had with Sky and King and some of his older children. King even ran away from the fortress at one point because he disagreed with Sim.
Yeah.
Those are all kind of newer ideas I put into the story after the fact, because I want to develop more of a realistic father figure in their life, whereas it's just not Sim being some sort of cult leader who's brainwashing them, but he gives them the real chance to grow and become who they're supposed to be. And that involves conflict with him and trying to figure out. And that's all reflected in there. But a lot of those ideas came after the fact.
Hmm. Okay. I also found interesting the first conflict I discovered in the book. You mentioned Sky and how she has a more realistic view of other children, because
Hmm.
this the one boy they meet Kellogg. That's the name
Yes.
he
Oh,
gave
yes.
he
Yes.
gave himself, and she says, "I'm not trusting him," because,
No.
and she also says, Sim always wants us to stay or remain 10 years old, and he has this more idealistic view of them as
Yeah.
children and what children are, and she clearly sees through him, and she realizes he's not what he pretends to be, and she's right, and that's where they clash. And
Yeah.
she also
Yeah.
tells him, we are grown, we are no longer children, we are no longer
Right.
10 years, 7 years, and we have to get, or we need you to give us a voice and a part of this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, he was controlling in many ways. He had his way, not the highway. He didn't want his children to leave. King had left a couple of times. That wasn't the first time in
Yeah.
the book that he had left. But yeah, he did kind of have a controlling personality. I think because he knew exactly what he wanted. In the beginning of the story, he cast away another adult who had come to them and was living with them for a while because he didn't want any other adult influence in their life. And I explained that in the book just so I did not want him to come across as some cult type of leader. So I had to put all these little layers in to explain why he was doing what he was doing and why he was very passionate about what his process was and what his beliefs was. And he wasn't really prepared for teenagers. I don't think his daughter died when she was a young girl. So he probably was not prepared for that stage of life. So I think when it arrived, he was at a crossroads as far as how am I supposed to deal with this. So, and yeah, Sky was like, yeah, I want to keep, you think you want to keep all of us scared. And Sim's like, no, I want to protect you. All he was doing, his motivator was keeping them safe. And I think part of that definitely included a level of control,
Mm.
where
Mm.
Sky was pulling away, but Sky wasn't young too still, and she wasn't being fully realistic either about,
Mm.
and you find that in other books as far as
Yeah.
some of the choices they make, and how that impacts and they learn kind of on their own after Sim, whoa, he was right about this kind of thing. So it does ultimately come down to them, um, learning,
Mm.
learning,
And I
some,
mean, keeping children safe, you do not just need an apocalypse, because keeping them safe is one thing, but it can be stifling, this
yeah,
kind of care.
yeah, yeah, it can. And he reveals a lot about that in his journals that are revealed in part two in the book
Yeah.
that they find. And that they review. So there's a lot more to learn in part two in The Revenant as
Mm.
far as, Sim's kind of personal battles and his struggles to keep everything together.
Mm.
So, yeah.
And what about the idea of choosing your name, your new name? Was it for you the idea of a new world, a new name, a new chance, or reinventing yourself even as a child, becoming who you want to be?
I think it was more about not being 100% sure what their names were when he found them. Well, when he met Teddy, Teddy's name was written on the door. His mom had written it on the door and closed herself off in the house to die, and he left him out in the living room.
Mm.
He couldn't get in, but she did write a note to whoever might find him about what his name was, and he kept his name through the whole story, Teddy. But I think, yeah, but some of the names he did know, but some of them he didn't. Like Baby, he found picking out of the trash, and I don't even know if I ever really assigned her a name. She was young, and she could have said her name. I don't remember, but I don't know. I just think it was one of those things that was born out of who are you? I don't really know who you are. Maybe you're so young you don't even know who you are. Let's just start over. Let's reset. The world is reset. Let's all of us reset. Let's pick a name. You got 30 days. And after the 30th day, that's who you are.
Mm. Yeah.
And some other names stayed. And then Teddy and Yamil. Miracle was only 3 when he was found, so he didn't probably know his name. And but some of them stuck, and then some other pig kids chose. And funny thing about the boy Leo is his name through the whole book, even through developmental editing, was Lego, because he was playing with Legos and building a city. And of course, we worried about copyright stuff, so
Ah.
we went back and removed the G from
Mm.
Lego, and he became Leo. So um, and I don't even remember. I think Leo was his regular name too, but originally he was supposed to be Lego, just based on Leo. All right, you're going to become Lego. We're going to add a G, but we
Yeah.
took the Lego thing out just for copyright and
Mm.
Lego upset or whatever.
Yeah. And it's the point where you are faced with adversaries and you are supposed to become the new leaders of this new world. How do you go about that? What do you need? What kind of tools do you need as a person to become
I
this new leader?
think, are you referring to Sim or maybe his?
In general, for his children, for him and for the children.
Well, I think what we learn in The Revenant is that you need the tools of success. These kids, you can't just go into an apocalypse. And even if you did, the kids, the original kids in any apocalypse would have died. They would have took a special group of
Yeah.
kids to travel on and learn through trial and error. And
Mm.
that's what it took with just kids in the world, trial and error and learning, and then passing on what you've learned to others. And I think that's what Sim did. He's already an adult. He's had worldly experience. He's had military training. And he could pass all of this on to the children. You need tools. You need time. And I think The Revenant definitely spells out the fact that everything that Sim gave to them for 3 years is what you need. You need to
Mm.
learn it, and you need to be on your own. Same with teaching. How many years does it take you before you felt like you became an effective teacher. For me, it was many years before I learned exactly the teaching strategies, the child psychology strategies, the materials you need, how you have to set up the environment. It takes you years. And then young people, 20, 21, 22, have the best intentions in teaching or otherwise, but they don't have the life tools, the experience to be the most effective at it.
Yeah.
So I think it just, you need time. Time is what you need to find out, and passion and desire to, I want to figure this out. You got to have that fire. I want to figure this out. And also, Sim gave us all these tools. Let's reflect. I'm going to give you a little spoiler, because I know you haven't read The Revenant, and our readers, potential readers, might not have either. But The Revenant, Sim actually becomes the Revenant in the story, because he comes to life in the book 2 in a different way than he was in book 1, through his journals, through his teachings. And this is a huge theme in book 2. The Revenant could have been construed as these people that came and tried to bring Zagan back to power, which I won't get into more of that, but that's basically the root of what the Revenant was going to be. But then it ultimately be Sim being the Revenant for the fortress, which is told about at the end of it. So yeah, I mean, you need, I guess that's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I also saw that there is another book. It's called Shift. It's about transformation. What can you tell us about that one?
My God, how much time do you got?
Oh, just go on.
No, I'll be edited anyway, so you'll be like, oh. No, but I love Shift. Shift was actually, I wrote when I was 13, I started writing. I wrote my 80s boy book. It was called The Bar Bandits. I hand wrote it in a 5-subject notebook. It was like 300 pages written. It was about my friends taking down terrorists at a girls' school. And it was a lot of fun. And so I've been writing since I was 13. And when I started my business, and all through my teaching years, which is about 12 years. And then when I started my childcare company, which is 15 years ago, I kind of stopped writing. I was building this business 15 years. I was married. I was raising 2 children. And finally, a few years ago, just about the time of COVID, I got separated. My kids are grown, and I finally delved back into writing, but now I'm, 47, 48 instead of, 30, 35. So I have all this new experience, all this new. And so Shift was the first book I wrote in this new period of my life. And so it is a story of passion. And honestly, it was never meant to be the story that it was supposed to be. I did some homework because, and this will be a little bit of a interest. I knew that I wanted to do a home invasion story, like The Fortress. Just a story that culminated in this intense home invasion, because I love home invasion stories. A little trivia, but so Shift was envisioned like that. All right, I'm going to have this family that's stalked by somebody. I don't know if you ever saw this movie. I really loved it. It was called oh God, I loved it so much I don't remember the title. It was called it was with James Bond in it. He met this guy. There was a tragic hot air balloon accident, and one of the family, somebody died in it, and these 2 people trying to help thwart the accident just happened to meet haphazardly, and from there, this guy thought that their fates were intertwined because of this incident, and he started to stalk the man. And through the whole movie is a stalking movie. And so I kind of like that. Wow. All right. Well, now it's just a guy. And what about a family? Have there been a story where a whole family was stalked by somebody? I'm sure there has been, but I wanted to do a story about a stalker who stalks a family, and ultimately it ends in this powerful thriller home invasion kind of thing. But I'm like, how can I realistically, with Facebook, with phones, with this, you can't really pull off a home invasion story of this magnitude in contemporary times in this way. So out of Shift, was born this other story, The Fortress, because I was traveling along I said, I really want to do this home invasion kind of thing. And I think, all right, wait a minute. I'll set it in the post-apocalypse when all these creature comforts and all these technologies broken down. So that became The Fortress. And then the shift on, let me get back to my family, which again, I wrote Shift before The Fortress and I wrote it. And so I said, I got to write a story about this family, this father, his wife dies. He has 3 boys and he's raising them. The oldest is 13, the youngest like 6, and then Dakota 8 in between. So I want to write this whole story about this family. And, but it's got to have some sort of driving element to it. I don't want it to be like, ordinary people where it's just a story about a family navigating loss. So that's when, and I never considered myself a fantasy writer or a dystopian writer. I always wrote straightforward contemporary stories, young adult, middle grade when I was in teaching. So I started to write Shift, and I did some research, said what could the central dilemma be here? And then I did a little homework, and one thing led to another, and sooner or later I'm developing this story that takes place from the point of view of the father's perspective, written from a middle-aged man's perspective, raising these 3 children, and his wife's passed away, and he's trying to navigate loss of his wife and his kids losing their mother and all this. And then all of a sudden, what's compounding is 13-year-old starts to exhibit all these mysterious things that are going on in his life. And his father, it's like, whoa, wait, what is going on here? And then these mysterious people show up in their lives and invite him, and they think they're being invited to this new age church or whatever. And slowly but surely over the course of the novel, and with much, with much resistance to it, is the father discovers that his son is a shapeshifter. Not as just shifter. Because I redefine kind of the lore of shape-shifting, and I make this all about, he's what we call an astral shapeshifter, which means, we refer to the laws of matter and energy with Einstein and all that, how you convert their energy into mass and mass back to, so it's a different kind of shape-shifting. So, and then slowly but surely over the course of books 1, 2, and 3 in the Shift series, I developed this whole other world of shape-shifting that the family has been a part of or entangled with, and the father didn't even know. Even his wife passed away, leaving all these secrets. And but his son is slowly coming into his own as far as learning what these powers are. But it's more about the family. Every story I write, I want it to be focused on the reality, which is why in this story, people would be like, this is kind of, because the father is so, he keeps trying to explain it away through a whole book. He's so like, this isn't happening. Like, this is green screen. This is fake. This is, what is happening here? Really? Are you crazy? He's seeing a psychiatrist. He's like, so it's told from the father's perspective. I don't establish the lore or the backstory of this shifting world in the beginning. It's not even told till really the end, and it develops over time. But I think it's a unique story about father coming to learn that his teen son is a shapeshifter and trying to reconcile that while raising children and being in this real world and and dealing with real world situations. So I think it's a very interesting. As a matter of fact, the beta readers and I haven't put it out yet. It was supposed to come out sooner, but I got a new marketing team on the Fortress to build that up. So it was delayed, but it's all ready. It's all ready. I can't wait for it to hit. I have 3 books, and I think they're going to be. I think they would be I would think they'd be well received. The feedback I'm getting on Shift is a lot different than the feedback on the Fortress stories. So it's kind of interesting.
And do you plan to bring one book out after the other? Because did I get it right with The Fortress? The book 1 came out in August 2023, then book 2 in September, and book 3 in October?
Yeah, I think it's a similar plan. That marketing team I had had that plan for the book and the release, okay. And then marketing team I'm with now has XYZ plan for Shift after we build up community for the Fortress and such. But it's a similar pattern. Yeah, probably 1 month or 2 apart. I think they said 2 months apart. So once the first one hits, within 2 months, the second, and and the third books will start
Mhm.
to it'll be pretty good because they're all three done, and I have a couple others done waiting to go after as well.
Okay. So
I'm a
then,
voracious writer, so
yeah,
I
yeah, which is fantastic because you said you have lots of work with the company, and still you're a prolific writer. What can you tell us about your writing process then?
Well, I'm pretty quick. I look at a lot of writers groups and forums and on social media. I'm look at the struggles of some of today's writers. I don't really feel like I struggle with a lot of, maybe because I'm older and I've been through a lot and I've had a lot of experiences over my life. Me, I don't struggle to write. I don't struggle to come up with ideas. I don't struggle. I hear about struggles all the time and say, well, I'm not really struggling. I know it's competitive out there as far as which way do you want to go? Do you want to go to traditional and building a platform, or do you want to self-publish, or do you want to, and how do I do this? And what AI can I use? What AI can I not? There's software out there where I can do this. So I just, I get on, I Word, Microsoft Word. I've learned, obviously all the formatting and different techniques, and I don't outline stories. I just have a general idea about what I'm going to do. I sit down. I write large blocks at a time. I don't necessarily write every day, but I write large blocks at a time.
Yeah.
And and I love to see where the story and my ideas take me. And then, of course, if you falter or misstep, that's where the developmental editors kind of tend to catch it and go back and say, wait a minute. And then because I've been working with a very good developmental editor. Her name's Erica McIntyre. And I've been working with her for several years, and I really love her feedback, what she's done. She's helped me transform The Revenant, book 2 in the Fortress, and the latest book I wrote, Familiar. She helped me really transform that one in a great way. And it's easy to get frustrated when people look at your work and say, look, no, all this doesn't, this is kind of, but when I'm a really strong revisionist. I'm very receptive to feedback, and I don't want to just make a story for myself. I want to make a story that makes sense, that resonates
Hmm.
with readers, that is, a tonally on
Yeah.
par with what it should be. And so it's a lot of process. I work with a lot of people. I've invested a lot of money, but this is the beginning stages really of all of this for me. I have a feeling down the road as I continue to write and continue to develop that it will be well invested, because I have a lot of faith in my own process and my own writing. And I have a ton of story ideas, which I map out and keep notes on. But I don't struggle to write. I read a lot, and I don't have, so it's never going to be those issues that I see a lot of people struggling with. Me, it's more of going to be about how to develop that platform and getting a community, getting a
Mm.
readership. Those things I'm going to be setting goals for more than how to write stories or how to, I think I'm already there at that point with
Mm.
my story.
Yeah, to get the word out there and get your audience.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's yeah.
yeah,
And then for
that's incredibly
it,
tough these days. Also for traditionally published authors. I mean,
yeah,
what you
yeah.
hear from them is also that you have to do a lot of marketing yourself these days.
I think that was always true. And that to me is, and I did read up on that, was for me a turning point as far as, do I want to self-publish all my work? And this day and age is a great opportunity to do so
Yep.
for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
And then the other reason is traditional publishing. You're talking about a years long process for one book. And there are
Yep.
still no guarantees, because a lot of times you have to do the same exact work you do for yourself as a self-publisher as you do for traditional published work. So to me, outside of a advance, which I don't need because I'm
Yeah.
successful in other areas of my life, I can slowly but surely work on all the endeavors I
Yeah.
have and the books I have through the self-publication venue. And my website, Transcendence Press, kind of spells out
Mm.
why I chose to go that route. I've always been on my own. I developed
Yeah.
business on my own for 15 years in other venues. So I've always had a strong entrepreneurial spirit, and I've always been a hustler and a go-getter. So for me, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, understandable. And what I also heard was the fact that a lot of traditionally published authors do both. I mean, especially if they are already established. And it gives them sometimes also more freedom to go down different
Yeah,
roads with
true.
different genres and so on. Because it feels as if traditional publishing usually does pigeonhole people, and if you're there, you can't get out there. So
Yeah. Yeah, and the royalties are higher. And if you can become successful, I mean, people, let's face it, people are making tons of money just doing silly TikToks for themselves or becoming bloggers or becoming YouTubers or like this is a day and age where, hey, you don't have to wait around and for somebody else. It's all about putting your fate in somebody else's hands or control.
yeah,
I don't really like that. I never liked that. I didn't like it in teaching. I don't like it in life in general. I think if you want to accomplish something, you know, then figure out how to do it
yeah,
on your own and do it, you know.
yeah,
So that was always been my philosophy. So, and it's a lot more fun. You retain a lot of that control yourself, and at least at the end of the day, you can say, well, I didn't make it because I didn't do something wrong, or I got to change something because this isn't working. So, hence what changed marketers, you know, during the middle of the Fortress run because I'm constant and I'm very analytical and I'm like, all right, well, what's working, what seems to be working, what's not, what can I do better? You have to have that kind of personality and drive to keep pushing forward and figuring it out. So that's
yeah,
half the fun of playing chess, being an entrepreneur. It is,
yeah,
that's part of it. It's fun.
yeah. And sometimes publishing houses, even the smaller ones, they get a little bit stuck in their views as well, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know much about it because I've never been traditionally published, but I definitely know, but I definitely done a lot of homework and I understand, I'm well understood the differences between doing things your own. And I published a book. Wow, it's out there still. Oh God, I wouldn't say what the title is because back then it was when print on demand technology was in its infancy. This was in 90, you know, or no, it wasn't, no, actually it wasn't that far. It was probably 2008. But wow, I know from experience we have come a long way, and you know,
Yeah.
but the caveat to that is you got millions of people writing books and publishing them, and that aren't really, you know, and I have no room to talk. Everybody has the right to do what they want to do, but and I my own the way I view myself as a writer may not be able to, you know, as far as oh I'm
Oh, got stuck.
saying is I mean, I don't think it's a rocket scientist to say millions of these books out there aren't vetted. They're not, you know, and then you're kind of fighting upstream against all of that that's out there. A lot of it that's just somebody satisfying their own whimsy to write or put something out and say they were published. For me, it's not about that. I don't really care. I don't even care to see about my books in print. I'm like, all you know, I see a lot of pictures on social media, people getting these boxes of printed books. They're like, yeah. I'm like, no, I don't care about that. I don't really want to see my books and I don't care about seeing my book in a hard copy print boxes of books. I want to see, are they selling? Am I getting good reviews? Are they selling? Are they, you know, that's all I care about. So, and because, not because there are a lot of people that could write and maybe they do and they say, well, I'll just write and it's out there and I don't care. But I'm like, I'm not at that point. For me, I'm looking at my writing to kind of reach people. I want people to be reached. I don't want to be rich off it. I just want to reach audience, interact with audiences, people talk my writing, what I've written, how it meant to them or what, if it's impacted them or if it raises discussions or if it, you know, gives some insight that they didn't have. I'm interested in that aspect of my writing reaching people, not to become rich, not to become, but I don't want to lose money on it. In the long run, ultimately, I don't want to, you know, I'm not writing for myself and I'm not writing to lose money. So that's my own personal, that's my own fight because eventually I have to find myself getting to a point where I am fulfilling that. I'm not losing money on writing, and I am not writing for myself only. So that's my goals.
Absolutely feasible and understandable. I mean, that's your right. Absolutely. And it was absolutely entertaining and interesting to read The Fortress and learn about those different characters and how they cope with this changed world and how Sim tries to help them to live without his guidance, although he keeps on seeing them as children when they are no longer that young. But I do get him in a way. Like he said at the beginning, it's his penance for what he
Yeah,
did.
because he wasn't a very attentive father himself, and I think that's what he learned
Yeah.
after the death of his daughter. You know, he
Yeah.
could have done better. That was what the whole house was. The fortress was his gift to his family, and saying, "Look, I'm promising to you with this house that we're going to have a better life, and I'm going to be a better father and a husband." And then all of a sudden, after they buy the house, 6 months later, everything goes left, and so best laid plans are, in the dirt. And he was supposed to die with his family, and he failed at that. So.
Yeah, and then he has a family of his own making, a different kind of family, but still his family.
And that means everything to him. I mean, remember in the end, when Ace, he has those last moments with Ace, and Ace kind of says, for whatever you're feeling, that you're, whatever sins you are trying to reconcile, you've long since done that for your child. And then he says, "You are my child." So, for me, that was a moving part in the story, where you actually realize that these kids he perceived as his own, over those years after he took them in.
Yeah,
which is important.
Yeah,
and that's all he was really doing. That control that he had was all a part in, just protecting them and wanting them to be kids too. He wanted them to be kids, even in the apocalypse, especially the two young boys, Yamil and Miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, keep that part of yourself.
Yeah.
Despite being a soldier, they are soldiers, but
yeah, he wanted them to retain that innocence of their child and all that. Even the rule he had when they were going to the heights for fun, as the kids got older, the 17-year-old could go and meet a girl up in the heights community, but he wouldn't let his 15-year-old king go, because you're not 17 yet, or whatever the age he established to go up and get involved in the antics of the heights community, with alcohol and sex and all that good thing. Nope, not till you're 17.
Wise words, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I need more wise words from you, Thomas. What would be your advice for any other aspiring author out there?
So my life philosophy has been find a way. And then it's great when you see the 20 kids, they find a way to all get a finger or a little piece of themselves on that little object that you have in the center of the circle. And that becomes a life lesson. Find a way. If you love it, if you have a passion for it, if you think you're good at it, find a way. And that's it.
Yep. Good advice. Absolutely. And Thomas, you mentioned the plans for the near future. Shift is going, and other books following the first one are coming out very soon. Are there any other plans you can elaborate on?
Yes, I finished a book called Familiar, which was book 1 in another 3-book series that I started. It's in developmental editing. I expect that to come out after Shift, and I'm just about done with the draft called The Cunning Ones. So that is another book that was developed as a series. So I'm just about done with the draft. My goal is to always have another book to put out right after the last one, not haphazardly so and put slop out there. It's not my goal. It goes through a process. It is vetted by a lot of people and a team of people. So I'm not out there to put garbage out, but I am out there to get ahead of where everything is, so that I have good stuff to consistently feed my audience or prospective audience of readers.
That's good to know, and rightfully so.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's my passion. I do childcare, all day, all night on the weekends. I'm about ready to direct a summer camp for 10 weeks with 80 kids in it. And then I'll come home at night. I'll write all my stories and go through that process on the nights and weekends and keep at it. So
good for your readers. Good for us. Looking forward to more from you. And Thomas, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
I'm coming to Vienna in
Yes.
In October. No, you know what the funny thing is? I will put this little bit of trivia out there. The fortress, and as it is portrayed on the cover of my book, is actually where I live. It's a picture of my house that I took and the marketer imposed on my thing. I was inspired to write the fortress here at my house because of the house. Everything described in the book as far as how the fortress is laid out is my house. I Airbnb my house in the United States and New York. People coming to New York, upstate New York, can actually come to the Airbnb at the fortress and see where all the action takes place. So that's just a little, and it is exactly as it is portrayed in the book. It's a former church rectory, and a church next door burned down in 1978 when I was a boy. I remember the smoke plumes, and never thinking that at 5 years old I would own the house next door to the church burned down. But everything, and it's St. Michael's, so the prayer of St. Michael's that's used in the book is all in reference and in celebration of where I live and the history of the house from 1890. I live right here. I'm in the fortress right now. So, and it is the former St. Michael's Rectory. And I love the St. Michael's prayer, and it portrays prominently in the Fortress book for that reason.
Fascinating. So, dear listeners, if you want to see where the action happened, just you know where to go now.
Yeah, exactly. So now I know if I start getting bookings from Vienna, why?
Maybe. Who knows? Who knows?
Exactly.
I keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, I will join you shortly in the green room. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, splendid. See you shortly.
Okay.
Dear listeners, we did deliver, I think, a hot episode on a hot day in Vienna. Well, at the time of the recording. We do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as my guest and I did. We hope you will return for another episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see and hear you next time. Until then.